早上好，欢迎大家参加这节财新辩论会。
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session on China's global ambitions. As you might heard just now, the foreign investment from China has grown more than tenfold over the past decade. And besides, the investment has been greatly diversified with a shift with simple investment to investment for more resources. At the same time, there is also a shift from the investment to the products to high ordinary products to high tech. At present, there is also another important issue. That is, when we invest overseas, it is very important for us to have foreign exchange reserves. So in the past, the question on our mind was how to use the foreign exchange reserves. But today, it seems already not the question anymore. So present today is Mr. Chu from the First Eastern Investment Group and Mr. Zhang Xiaoqiang, the Vice Chairman of China Center for International Economic Exchanges, and Mr. Klaus Kleinfeld, Chairman and Chief Executive of Alcoa Inc. And the other panelist is Mr. Zhang, the Vice Mayor of Tianjin, and the last panelist is Zhang Veihmeyer, Chairman of KPMG International. So according to the Ministry of Commerce, in the first 5 months, the Chinese overseas investment amounted to 73 billion, with an increase of about 60% increase. And at the same time, the investment in non-financial sector was less than 40%. So this shows that the overseas investment from China has surpassed the investment in China. So my question is, will this bring more opportunities for Chinese companies overseas? And secondly, so in such a context, so what might be the trend for the exchange rate between RMB and American dollars?
Increased in the past decade. We are still at the beginning of what I think will be a major capital revolution. China's global ambitions, I think, will shake the world in the many decades to come. You talk about buying know-how, buying resource, but there's also sophisticated investors who are looking to international market because the valuation overseas is much lower or much more attractive than the domestic market valuation in China. So some are actually going to make investments purely on a corporate finance basis, on a value arbitrage basis. And on that point, the impact of Brexit that we saw a few days ago will, in the short to medium term, provide a huge opportunity for Chinese investors. Because apart from anything else, the valuation has come down 20%. The currency has gone down 10% in just a few days. So the short-term volatility of the UK going out and the terms of going out will continue to give us superb opportunity for longer-term investors. So I think we are really seeing nothing yet. There will be a lot more to come, and the impact will be fundamental on a global basis.
谢谢丽丽。丽丽的意思就是，丽丽是
Thank you very much. So it seems that the speaker is very optimistic, and we haven't realized what might happen in the future yet. There's still a lot to come. However, my question is, so what might be the risks? Now, the UK has declared its Brexit, and the financial market might become more and more complicated. So now let's listen to the comments from Mr. Zhang Xiaoqiang.
这几年快速增长，刚才特别你举到了今年前5个月的数字，735亿美元，比上年同期增长62%。那么
So as a matter of fact, the investment, China's investment has been increasing all the time, and you mentioned that there was an increase of about 60%. After the economic crisis, it is obvious that the paces of overseas investment has been sped up, and the commodity prices have been decreasing. And Chinese companies are going out because of the technological advancement of the Chinese companies. So, for example, among the Fortune 500, so more than 100 companies were actually from the Greater China area. So another important thing you might notice that China has been at the top for more than 10 years in terms of foreign exchange reserves. In the 1990s and the beginning of this century, there were quite a lot of risks in our investment. At present, the risks are still there, but I don't think it is riskier as compared with the previous years. As a matter of fact, a lot of companies, a lot of private companies are doing very well. For example, Geely has acquired Volvo. For another example, Shuanghui Company acquired Smithfield, pork products producer. I think that these cases have demonstrated a kind of a win-win situation so far. These companies are also developing very well. As to risks, well, Brexit has triggered some risks, but it is more a political incident. It is more a political case. As a matter of fact, it has a lot to do with the companies themselves. At present, the companies have a higher debt ratio. I just heard that the debt ratio for the state-owned Chinese companies has reached about 65%. And the central government has decided to decrease the leverage ratio. And this shows that the debt level is high and the leverage rate is high, and that is why Chinese companies are going abroad. Additionally, so in the past, there was limited investment in acquisition and merger. However, in recent years, we're beginning to see increasing trend of our investment in acquisition and merger. Not long ago, I talked with the Director General of Trade of the European Commission, and I asked him what his opinion about merger and acquisitions. And I believe that in the future, it is very important for us to acquire the technology, acquire the companies, and at the same time protect the IPR. I think these two things are equally important. And another important issue I would like to mention is what's is about the over-competitiveness in some cases between different companies. If there is a kind of over-competitiveness between companies, it might lead to a kind of a lose-lose situation. This is a new issue that we should pay attention to. Thank you very much, Xiaoqiang. So this round of overseas investment, we should try to avoid the possible risks in this round of investment overseas. There are more and more cases of merger and acquisition, and at the same time, the competition between different companies is getting more and more fierce. It's a kind of a cutthroat competition. Well, now let's turn to Mr. Klaus and then come back to the issue again.
Facing really a shift from what I call a China Go Global 1.0 to a China Go Global 2.0. And the way I would describe the China Go Global 1.0, it was a focus on M&A that was securing resources, most important resources. And therefore, it was also, when you look at the investments, it was very strongly focused on resource-rich countries. So very strong focus on Latin America, Africa. What we're seeing now, in line with the shift of the economy here in China, we see the transition more to technology, to services, to consumer-driven economies. I mean, you mentioned already some of the acquisitions that has been done, but I think we're just seeing the start of it. If you look at the statistics, you actually see that now private players, the first phase was very strongly also state-owned enterprises, and you're now seeing the private sector is getting active, right? And the private sector has been responsible for 76% of the deals in the last year. So you see a major shift in there. And you also see a major shift in terms of which countries are getting the benefit of it. And you see it's basically Europe, it's the US, and it's Australia. I mean, it's the more advanced countries, because those are the ones that, as you would expect, have more of what China wants in the future. So this raises a question also in terms of what needs to be done, because on this panel here, the question was China's global ambitions, right? And this seems to be a global ambition, but it's not just built around buying companies abroad, it's also the ambition of many private companies to become global players. And there's a lot that can be done inside of the companies, and there's a lot that is done and can be done on the political front. On the political front, I mean, things that have worked elsewhere is to look at standardization, to basically have standards in different industries, like lightweighting standard for automotive, that have driven very, very strong innovation, like building codes for energy efficiency. These are things where competition can be enhanced and move forward. We've seen it here on the telecommunications side. I expect more to happen. You can see also the IP enforcement. You mentioned that before. A major achievement here that has been gained, I would say, over the last years, but more that needs to be done, making it easier to protect IP also in China. Then the whole question of talent, the whole question of innovation. Again, a lot has been done here. I just saw that the early round funding here has grown 14 times from 2009 to 2014. So a lot has happened, but it's still subpar to what needs to happen. And one major thing on the talent side, in my view is, and love to hear on this is the diversity. I mean, when you look at, when you talk to people, where is the hub of innovation? I think most people would agree it's the Silicon Valley. But then when you look a little bit deeper and say, what has been driving this? It's been driven very strongly of being a talent magnet. 36% of the population are foreign-born in the Valley. And if you look at the creation of wealth, the statistics are even stronger. Here, I mean, if you look at even in places like Shanghai, Beijing, and Shenzhen, the statistic is below 1%. Right, so that's a question that I have also to our Chinese colleagues. I mean, how you see that. Let me close the opening here. This also, in my view, brings a new discussion on board. And the discussion is, how does China define its role if you want to be a global player? Because it has to be also open for foreign direct investments inside of China. And some of the backlashes, I think, that we've seen with investments elsewhere, and latestly in Europe, are questions around when companies want to come in here, they still are faced with questions around you have to have a joint venture, otherwise you can't enter, you have to have have this type of technology transfer, and that's not exactly the definition of a level playing field. And then the question comes, there are certain industries where China should naturally probably not be a player. And there are some commodity industries that are there where China is not the most competitive, never will be the most competitive player, whereas it defines these sectors, as strategically important. Now, that's a good definition. It stems from the old kind of paradigm, but the new paradigm, if the new paradigm is we want to be an innovation leader, things like that at least have to be discussed. So let me open with this.
谢谢 Klaus 的
You have raised a lot of good points. For the last one, I think is especially very good, because for the Chinese enterprises, they want to be global players, and China's market would also have to be open to the international competition. Now I'm going to ask Mr. Zhao to say a few words. Tianjin is an open city here in China, and also one of the earliest open cities here in China. In the first round of opening to the outside world, foreign capitals arrived China via Tianjin. In the past, Tianjin was an old industrial base. Now we have enjoyed very good economic growth here in Tianjin. Last year, it was about 9.3%. I think one thing is that we continue to open to the outside world, including attracting foreign investment. For example, the renowned company Motorola had a lot of investment in China in the past, but now we have other foreign players as well, and also for the private enterprises and also SOEs here in China. It's a good combination. Here in China, we talk about going out, enterprises going out, and the government actually supports these kind of activities. For Tianjin, in doing so, our positioning is that we want to be the bridge and facilitator for the enterprises to go abroad. Last year, foreign investment scale is about 7.4 billion RMB yuan, which increased a lot. So in the past 5 years, that is during the past 5 year, during the 12th five-year plan, it was an annual increase of 42%. The number of investors of China making investments in outside China is about 65. So we can see that we are increasing. We are also attracting domestic capital, and also we strike a balance of attracting foreign investment. In the future, we're going to do more. China is similar to that of the other cities in China. For example, we talked about in the past, China is actually transforming from developing economy to, going to be more developed. And also in the past, SOE dominate the economy here in China, but now we have a lot of private players. And also when we talk about M&A and also equity participation, these are also increasing. Therefore, in Tianjin, we are also experiencing similar things as that happened here in China. In the past, we were resource concentrated. For example, we have some resource concentrated resources, enterprises, etc. And also for foreign capitals, a foreign market, for example, food, pharmaceuticals, textiles, and garment. We just make direct investment in overseas market to set up plants and other facilities. Now the commodities price is not increasing as it was in the past. For the government here in Tianjin, we support most the scientific-oriented enterprises. For the past 5 years, we were giving a lot of help to those kind of enterprises. Now we have 800,000 enterprises. So this is a huge increase. So these kind of small-scale giant enterprises, which are scientific-oriented, they are also making expansions overseas. And if you look at the segment, they are actually working with the foreign players in their respective field in other countries. For example, a German expert wrote about the invisible champion, talking about these kind of enterprises. And these enterprises of other countries. Some of them in the process of globalization are in China, some are not. So this actually poses opportunities for us. Now, when we talk about this World Economic Forum, we're talking about the powers of industrial transformation of 4.0. We're talking about the new champion. So in our understanding, new champion actually is the equivalent of Chinese small-scale giant enterprises, that is the startup scientific-oriented companies. So with combination of the potentials in the Chinese market and also in combination with the foreign enterprises, technology, management expertise. So this kind of combination will result in a win-win situation for both enterprises. So our enterprises which are scientifically oriented are going out and doing M&A or other kind of activities. These are the things that we are supporting. I visited the Winter Davos last year. In a place where I visited, one of the Tianjin enterprises also participated with the local companies in the overseas company. This is Kaifa Enterprise. They were doing the direct current equipment with their counterparts. It's a small branch in Germany. I visited the company in Germany and I talked with the management people there. I was talking with them. They felt very happy, they told me, because in the past their boss was from Britain, but now their boss is from China, and China has huge market. So this is a great opportunity for them. And also the R&D are done respectively in different countries. But this kind of development is in combination with the Chinese market here. So this is an example of globalization. So the result is a win-win situation for both players. So Tianjin actually is helping the enterprises to go abroad. In the future, we're going to encourage more, invisible champions or the so-called little giant science companies to work together with the foreign players. So this is a driving force for the transformation. Another thing is that the engineering project or programs overseas, in the past, it used to be the turnkey type of contract program, but now it's being transformed for making investment and doing operations. So this is a new growth point. Our positioning is that we want to be the back-end supporting center. So the companies are working at the front end. We are the hub of logistics for those companies. We provide financing, talent training, and also port cooperation, purchasing, and also processing and assembling. Because, we have the North Free Trade Zone here in China. Actually, we have a lot of facilities. This can help these companies for their overseas project in a comprehensive way. Because now SOE is actually the bulk for making overseas investment programs. Some of them are located here in Tianjin. So the government is actually giving them logistic help in different ways, and this can reduce their risk of operation. We are also working with the foreign country in terms of the administrative help and also training of language, and also working with the host country government and other agencies. So this can ensure high efficiency for those companies. So Tianjin is also establishing zones in overseas countries. For example, in Egypt, President Xi Jinping witnessed Taida's zone in Zurich. Actually, phase 1 project has already been completed. It's about $100 million. Second phase is going to be further expanded. So in the future, this kind of zone, industrial zone or park, will be a form of cooperation. So for going out of the Chinese enterprises, we're focusing on the science technology companies. And also we are the logistics center providing help to those enterprises who are making investments overseas. And also we encourage this kind of cooperation. Thank you for sharing with us. And I like this idea of a little giant. Now we have a KPMG speaker. KPMG actually are providing both way services for the Chinese enterprises as well as foreign enterprises in this process. Now you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I think our previous speakers have covered an awful lot of the substance. The problem with being last is saying something new, but let me just add a couple of thoughts. I think one of the things that's relatively unique about the position we play at KPMG is that we see leading businesses and companies in every part of the world, and we have daily contact with the executives in those companies, understanding what their strategies are. And we certainly expect, based on all that interaction, that M&A and outbound investment from China is going to continue to increase at an aggressive pace. I think our expectation is probably that outbound investment continues to grow at 10% a year. We're seeing, I think, a number of trends, and if you look at the number of acquisitions that Chinese companies have made outside of China, in the first half of 2016, it already surpasses the entire number in 2015. Klaus mentioned that Western Europe, the US, and Australia are certainly three of the largest destinations. I think from an individual country standpoint, the US is probably still the leading destination. And we would, on average, over up the years, kind of through 2010, 11, 12, the average number of acquisitions of US-based companies from China-based companies was about 10 to 13 a year. In 15, that number was over 100. And I think that's just reflective of the trend that we're going to continue to see. And the important issue, I think, is not just the numbers, but the size is increasing. And importantly, and again, Klaus, I agree with your point, what's really interesting is the nature of the companies being acquired and the shift to technology-based, consumption-based, I think is a very significant trend which we need to pay attention to, and I think we expect it to certainly continue. If you look at what's underlying some of this, or what's driving some of this increased M&A activity, we're going to release later this afternoon a very comprehensive survey of 1,300 CEOs from around the world. About 130 of those CEOs are running China companies, so it's a very representative snapshot of how China leaders of major businesses are viewing their strategy. And one of the questions we asked in the survey was, what do you see as one of the primary sources of your growth going forward? And the China-based CEOs had a significantly higher percentage of answers that tied into a focus on innovation. Half of the Chinese CEOs surveyed indicated that their first and primary responsibility was to drive innovation. And that is a significantly higher percentage than we saw in any other country that the 1,300 CEOs were located in. So I think it's that passion and thirst for innovation which is driving much of this M&A activity, much of this outbound investment. And again, if you read between the lines and you look at the messages that the CEOs are conveying to us in this survey that we've just completed, there is no reason to expect that to subside. I think the CEOs feel like they're getting great encouragement and support from the government in China to continue to invest aggressively outside of China, just as you've indicated. And so we think this is a trend which not only will continue, but will continue to accelerate going forward.
谢谢 Zhang。
Thank you very much, Zhang. So just now, we listened to the 5 panelists, and we have got some very important points. So in these days, we have been talking about Brexit. So I would like to ask whether Brexit will have any impact on the Chinese companies. So what are the challenges and what are the opportunities, please?
Now, I think Brexit to many people, particularly investors, are disappointing because we see the UK playing a very useful role in the continued reform of the EU, and UK is an open, FDI-friendly country. But having said that, we have to remember it's not the end of the world. So what? They have to work something out, right? So, and long term, the UK sovereign risk and the EU investment risk to us as a long-term investor is actually quite neutral. And in fact, there are silver linings. From an opportunistic point of view, short-term market volatility give Chinese investor, Asian investor a lot more choice, cheaper investment cost. And if we are able to persuade UK and EU market that Chinese investment is to be welcomed, not to be feared, we're not going to take away jobs. Rather, contrary, we're going to protect jobs, but also help UK and European companies to expand their market into China. I mean, we must do that. That is priority. Chinese investment has to not to be feared, has to be welcomed because of this and that value added. Then I think short, medium, long term, the opportunity is much better than the risk.
这样你同意吗？朱丽丽的看法，就是说，打开了一个机会。
Do you agree, Zhang? So Brexit means more opportunities, and Chinese companies can invest in Europe and UK in a more efficient way. Do you agree to that? Zhang, please.
Wait my turn.
It's random now.
I think I agree with Victor's comments to a large extent. I think first and foremost, this is a matter for the British people. They've spoken, and now we all have to react and figure out what this means for us. I think if I look at the activity pre-Brexit referendum vote that we see in terms of outbound investment from China, frankly, I'm not so sure it is going to have a big effect on China companies. And the reason I say that is we see much more activity, for example, China, Germany, over the last 2 years than we have had any activity into the UK from China. So while Western Europe collectively has been a big destination for outbound investment, I would submit that the majority of that has not been into the UK. It's been to some other leading economies, and particularly Germany, where we've seen more and more activity, and our clients in Germany are actively engaged in establishing stronger bilateral ties with Chinese companies and vice versa. Listen, I think none of us have a crystal ball. There's a lot of things to get sorted out. How this exit gets negotiated is going to have a big impact on how significant the impact to anyone is. But I actually expect that potentially the impact to China-based companies will be less than the impact in a number of other places based on historical activity.
谢谢。小强主任。
刚才实际上已经谈了我的初步看。
Mr. Zhang, please. Well, I agree with him. Brexit will not have such a substantial impact on China. So in the perspective of the relationship between China and the EU, I don't think the UK plays such an important role. As a matter of fact, so Brexit means that in recent years, the British people are getting unhappy with some of the other issues, for example, the immigration, and therefore I don't think it will have a substantial impact on the investment from China. Klaus, please.
A few things. One, Victor said it already, it's volatility, and volatility is never good. I think the political fallout is larger than just in England. You see already the ripple through in Europe, and I think the third point on the political front is it also is a reflection of the increased populism and the increased misunderstanding between political forces and what's really going on the ground. So that's what I see on the societal front. On the economic front for China, I mean, there's this old saying, you know, you lose a battle, but you never lose a war if you have the right strategy. China has gone through many bigger things than Brexit. Brexit will, on this dimension, be forgotten very, very quickly. The strategy is absolutely sound to go to the next phase. As I said, China go global 2.0. You know, that is the right strategy, and also it's reflected in the development here of the summer Davos. I remember the first summer. This is the 10th summer Davos here. I remember the first summer Davos. I mean, much more focused on the resource industry, and you see now this great fair of innovation and technology, and you also see the new entrepreneurs coming in. You feel, when you go through the halls here, you feel the spirit of entrepreneurism. I think there is this great entrepreneurial capability inside of the Chinese people. I think if you put this in, most of this needs a system, you know. If you put a system around it, where also young people get given the opportunity to form new companies, find a good team, you know, and get funding, get support also in incubators, you know. I think there's a whole host of innovation that can be unleashed, not just in the big private companies, but I mean, every dynamic economy needs startups, you know. And I think that's one thing that I'm very encouraged about, what China has again done in the last really 5 years in this, and I'm optimistic that this will go on and Brexit will be soon forgotten, certainly here.
Haishan 市长。
Haishan, please, the Vice Mayor of Tianjin. I fully agree with Zhang and the other speakers. So the impact will not be so substantial. Obviously, that the UK is a very important country in finance, but I don't think it will have a great impact on the trade so far. So in recent years, so a lot of Chinese companies have been requiring and merging with the high-tech companies overseas. However, the question I want to ask is whether we can really get the state-of-art technology, or we can only get the lagging behind technology, abandoned technology by other countries. Again, to clarify, can we get the first-class technologies, the state-of-the-art technologies, or not? Zhang, please.
You know, I think if you look at a number of the acquisitions that are already taking place, I wouldn't look at it as has-been technology. You know, you look at the activity in healthcare, semiconductors. I would not look at what's already taken place and conclude that it's old or has been technology at all. I think one of the dynamics that China companies looking to acquire, let's just stick with the United States for a moment, will be the review by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which, as we know, has been objecting to several deals that have been proposed recently. I actually think if you look at that in the context of the significant increase in the number of acquisitions, I mentioned before, an average of 10 to 13 to over 100, it's not surprising that you see CFIUS objecting to more acquisitions because the volume has increased. I think the other thing that is driving it is that shift we talked about into technology-oriented, and that's the technology transfer is the primary concern of the U.S. government in those acquisitions. So I think we can expect to see increased scrutiny and continued objection to certain transactions. But I wouldn't overreact to the cases where the committee is objecting. I think there are an awful lot of opportunities for China-based companies to be very successful, either partnering with or in a true M&A transaction, acquiring access to that leading-edge technology. And I think it's an avenue that needs to be continued to be pursued, and I expect China to win in that regard going forward.
小强主任，这个刚才江也提到。
So, Mr. Zhang, John mentioned that the Investment Commission has a role to play. So I want to ask, when Chinese companies go in abroad, so what role does the Chinese government play? Well, so in the recent years, there is a trend of merger and acquisition. According to the Ministry of Commerce, by the end of 2014, the financial industry, and the leasing industry takes up quite a big proportion, but for other sectors, it doesn't take such a big proportion. So there are also some M&Gs in the cinema industry. I mentioned just now that a Chinese company has acquired Smithfield, and recently a Chinese insurance company is acquiring a world chain world hotel chain. So from this you can see actually, so in the overseas investment by China, the Chinese companies hopes that its innovation capacity can be further improved through this M&A, through the merger and acquisition. It's not only a matter of technologies, but also a matter of innovation in the management and also in the systems. So in recent years, the Chinese companies has been investing overseas, and this has greatly improved the Chinese companies' competitiveness in the international arena. And I believe that this is more important than the technologies themselves. If we only focus on getting the technologies, we will not be welcomed by the international community because it is not mutually beneficial. Mr. Zhang mentioned that outbound insurance has been trying to acquire international hotel chain, and I also noticed that outbound insurance has just withdrawn from another merger and acquisition case. So this shows that the Chinese companies usually has a lot of money. I just want to know whether things are changing in recent years.
We have to show that we are, as Vice Chairman Zhang said, we have to make sure that we are bringing value. We're helping our potential investing company to expand into Asia, expand into China. We are at the same time benefiting from their world-class management system, global practices. These are important. And I think also the politics is also important. We have to manage not just, if you're making a major acquisition in the US, Washington is important, but also the local community is important. we have to show that we care about the local community, we care about jobs protection and job creation, we're bringing other benefits. So I think the psychological side is important. Now, whether we are looking at the top end of the high tech or very basic services, the important criteria is it has to be relevant to our investment. If we're buying a particular technology to help the strategic expansion in the Chinese domestic market, you have to go for the relevant technology, whether that's the very high end or mid end, right? On the other hand, if you're looking for partnership, that's also important because we need to learn to walk before we run. I think that's one of the lessons we're going to learn. The Japanese lessons in the 70s and 80s is actually quite relevant for Chinese investors going abroad. Yeah.
谢谢。
Thank you. Now we have some time left. I think now the floor is open to the audience. If you have questions, you can raise your hand and ask your question. And please introduce yourself and also tell us what the question is targeted at the panelists on the stage. Second row.
Tatsumasa from Japan. That's a wonderful debate. I really learned a lot. One question to my friend Victor Chu. You talked about Japanese lessons in 70s and 80s could be a good lessons for Chinese companies. But Japanese companies rushed to foreign countries in the 80s but came back to Japan after the burst of bubbles in the early 1990s. But I think that Chinese companies seems to be merging, fitting well with many foreign companies. Do you think there is a difference in mentality between Japanese and Chinese? To my sense, Chinese people are more global by nature than Japanese. What is your experience on this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Masuda. That's a very good comment. I think to some extent you are correct because the Chinese investor had a benefit of the Japanese investment, and also we are 30 years, ahead because we're talking about the 70s and 80s in the Japanese case. We're now talking in 2016. So we've moved on. And also, one advantage the Chinese investor had is, of course, the Chinese market is bigger than the Japanese domestic market. But there's a lot of Japanese experience that can be helpful to the Chinese market. And what I dearly hope is that the Japanese companies and the Chinese markets and the Chinese companies can cooperate more in the international market, particularly in the case of engineering and construction work, like what Veihmeyer Zhang has mentioned. Chinese companies and Japanese companies tend to be competing on the same projects, but there's actually a lot of opportunity for cooperation, and I hope that could happen in the future. Yeah.
第3排。
Third row. Thank you. I'm a journalist from JMN News. I think to follow up the question, you talk about China's domestic market and overseas market, the long-term opportunities. These should be a long-term return for Chinese investment overseas. Can you make some comparisons about making investment in China, making investment overseas? Which one?
KPMG, sorry.
I suggest first Zhang answer this question and then Zhou, please. Yes.
Okay. If I understood the question properly, it's contrasting in-country investment and the expected returns with outbound investment. Is that okay? I think a lot of the companies that we work with, I think, would actually not use the exact same criteria to evaluate those two investments. In other words, your your objective in some of the outbound investment could be very different than investment decisions you're making in country locally, which may be much more based on an expected rate of return, whereas what we see a lot of the companies that we're working with as they are going outbound, really thinking much more strategically than simply measuring financial returns over some medium-term period, but really looking at access to intellectual property, access to innovation, what kinds of new innovation can they drive in their organization by virtue of the transaction that they're contemplating. So I think we see in a number of cases different metrics and different evaluation criteria being applied to transactions that are being contemplated overseas.
Well, I think that when you look at, and 1,000 studies have been done on this, when you look at what really determines whether an acquisition is successful or not, it is the post-merger integration. And what is most critical in the post-merger integration? It is the cultural aspect and the capability of the management team to integrate the newly acquired company, right? And that's actually where, in my view, a big issue could come up, because money is not the determining factor for success, right? It's really the intercultural and skills as well as the emotional intelligence, how the people of the company that get acquired do feel enabled to be a part of the new company. And in what I've seen in the first wave, what I called China Go Global 1.0, when it came to resource-rich companies, that was easier because it was basically the Chinese culture taking over, taking control, getting efficiency. When you go into an innovative field, this is going to be much more difficult. And it requires a skill that unfortunately in Chinese management we have too little of. So that's one area which in my view is going to be the biggest limiting factor to make this successful. So it's easier, to your point, it's much easier to grow in China, right, and to come with a product in China and to export it than to buy a large company outside of China.
I think right now, in terms of valuation, it's fantastic for Chinese companies to go global. But we have to make sure that we get the psychology right and the natural synergies can be actually implemented. On desktop is a no-brainer. Chinese company buying or investing into global companies that can help them to leapfrog in technology, in management standards, in the global psychology and culture, and bring that service or product back to or improve our domestic market, everybody wins. So if we are honest and we do our due diligence right, get professionals to help us and use the best professionals in the target country, I think the long-term value creation for everybody is real.
Lily, 你反复讲估。
You've been talking about valuation. Valuation is very good. When you talk about valuation, well, you're talking about the assets in retrospect of their historical valuation or in retrospect of China's asset and valuation. In A-share asset here, it's very, very expensive. Which is less expensive?
But I think historically, the Western valuation is actually very attractive right now, except Silicon Valley, because China is still growing at 6.5%, whereas the rest of the world is growing at, 20%, 30% of that. So, and also the RMB is going to become more and more international. So I think from that point of view, there is a real value differentiation now. But of course, the A-share market needs to be adjusted, in the medium term too. Yeah.
还有时间给最后一个问题。
Time for last question.
问题呢，想问我们天津的父母官海山司长。此时呢，大家都知道天津呢恰逢5层机遇的叠加，一个是京津冀协同发展，另外是一带一路， 和我们这个国家创新自主示范园区和滨海新区先试先行和中国天津自由贸易试验园区的建设。我们今天探讨的是中国国际的雄心。我想请问海山市长的是，说天津自贸区的建设可以为中国企业走出去提供哪些便捷？这是第一个问题。那第二个问题，请问海山市长，天津的雄心是什么？谢谢。
好，非常感谢你的问题。天津呢，确确实实如您所说，现在面临着非常难得的历史的发展机遇。中央政府把天津新的定位更加明确。
Tianjin has a great historical development opportunity because the northern free trade zone areas here in Tianjin, which means that in the future, opening port, opening patent, and opening experiment, and also institutional innovation is now here in Tianjin, because China is huge. And also in the new round of further reform, it's a two-way and comprehensive opening. So in, institutional innovation in many areas, we have to find some places or cities that are already have good experience of going international or working together with international counterparts. So Tianjin is designated as an experiment zone in that regard. Therefore, for going out and attracting firms here in China, these are the biggest feature of China's reform and opening to the outside world. In the past, we attract investment here in China. Now we encourage our enterprises to go abroad. So it's a two-way opening. Therefore, we can leverage two markets, domestic and international. At the same time, we can make use of two resources, domestic and international as well. So in this process, we will gradually integrate with the rest of the world and to be in line with the trend of world globalization. This actually means for China that opening to the outside world remains to be the biggest sources in China. In 1860, China has a history. At that time, Tianjin was forced to open to the outside world. At that time, many advanced management ideas and industries were in China. Now, in modern China, actually, Tianjin was a port and a showcase. Now, in recent years, Tianjin has a very rapid economic growth rate, and in the future, we hope that in the process of opening, we will still be in a leading position when we talk about going abroad and making investment. We want to help those enterprises to do so because the free trade zone gives us a lot of preferential policies in financial area. We have the financial reform 30 policies. And also FTA account and RMB settlement account and also offshore account. If you have a normal business, overseas under $40 million, you have a free conversion of your foreign exchange and also RMB. If you make investment overseas, if you make money overseas, you can also make the settlement in RMB. So this is a great support. And also in this kind of two-way opening, domestic market is gradually opening. This is also very important for Chinese enterprises going abroad. This is not to seek for technology for that purpose, because in this kind of convergency and development, technology is one factor. In the past, we attracted a lot of foreign capital here, making facilities or plants here in China. But now we're using Chinese market, which is a driving factor or locomotive for world economy. Now we have witnessed about 2,000 visitors for this time's World Economic Forum, because this forum is taking place ahead of the scheduled agenda. We were afraid we will not have a lot of visitors as a result, but now we still see a lot of visitors. This means that people want to see China, and China is their focus or of interest. So when we go abroad, our enterprise has the advantage of knowing the local market. So in that kind of cooperation, many of the overseas product management, marketing, as well as the concept, when in combination with Chinese enterprises, the Chinese enterprises can help them to have access to the local market. So this will have a win-win result for both players. This will actually be very significant for the development of the world economy. And for Tianjin, we can use this kind of concept of our enterprises and also these kind of advantages of the Chinese enterprises to work together with the foreign players. We are also opening to foreign capitals. In a place in Tianjin, we have a lot of German solely owned enterprises. They are very good, and their growth rate is very big. They have a good market. I visited Germany. I visited a lot of German enterprises, and these enterprises who have operated here in China, they are talking about go to China. And this kind of concept has been very popular among the German players, but maybe different ways. They can set up manufacturing facilities here in China. They can set up joint ventures, or they can do solely foreign-owned. You can work together with the local players if they like. But if you want to seek for resources or market, then you can just do M&A here. So one of the important things of the Chinese market is that we need R&D resources from overseas. In other words, I'd like to thank you, Mayor Haishan. I think actually your remark is a good full stop for today's discussion, which means optimistic. So China's enterprise making investment overseas is very sustainable. I'd like to thank you all for taking part in this discussion. Thank you.